Hey there, and welcome to the Confident Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Brooks. Join me as I sit down and chat with co-hosts, friends, and carefully curated guests and talk about all the things that empower you to become your best and most confident self. So, let's get started. There's a question I've been sitting with lately. Not the who am I now question I've spent the past year processing, but the one that comes after. Now, what do I build? Because here's what no one tells you about reinventing yourself. Rebuilding your identity doesn't automatically tell you how to rebuild your life or your business. In fact, sometimes it just makes it harder because what you had before, she's not who you are anymore. And what worked for her doesn't work for who you're becoming in this season. And that's something I've been thinking about. And I wanted to share on today's podcast about what that looks like and how we unpack it. So welcome back. And if you've been listening this past year, you know we've walked through deep identity work together. We've walked through grief, loss, the messy middle, the who am I now season. But today, I'm turning a corner. We're turning a corner. And I'm so looking forward to what this new season brings. Because here's the point where we have to just stop and think and process and all the things that require us to start building. And that's where I find myself. That's where I am. And I think collectively, that's where we are too. So today I want to talk about what I'm learning about reinvention, and not just for yourself, but of what you're actually creating, what we're doing with this, and how it shapes this version of who we're becoming, what we're gifting and creating and bringing into this world, because they're all connected, but they're not just one and the same. They're intertwined. And so what does reinvention actually mean? That was the question. But for the longest time, I thought reinvention just meant starting over, wiping the slate clean, hitting the hard reset, and overnight we're reprogrammed. But the reality is that isn't how it works, because becoming someone new completely, that's the hard part. That's the inner work. That's the identity work. So I'm going to talk about what reinvention is not. This is something I think we need to make known and clear before we dive in and unpack everything. So reinvention is not about becoming someone new. It's not just about the identity, but it's about building from who you've already become. And reinvention is that series of doing the inner work, finding who you are, what you value, what you hold on to, what you're willing to surrender, let go, and not carry into this new season. And we've unpacked it in so many episodes. Again, reinvention isn't about becoming someone new. It's about building from who you've already become. So this is the moment where everything changes. Because what you've already walked through this season, like for me, what I have is loss, grief, complete life upheaval. You don't just bounce back. You rebuild from the ground up. That foundation, that whole core identity has been shaken. And maybe you're in the season, but maybe there's some areas that feel shaky that need to be reassessed and reevaluated. But either way, whatever area of your life or all of your life, we have to build from the ground up. And when you rebuild from your identity, your values shift, your priorities change. What you're willing to tolerate shrinks. What you're willing to protect expands. And suddenly, that business you built before, the offers, the structures, the way you've been doing everything, the way you've been showing up, that system, it probably doesn't align or fit it. Just like we've outgrown these versions of ourselves. And maybe that applies for our businesses and our contributions and vocations to life. But it's a moment that we take awareness and insight and reassess where we are. And I'm not saying that because there's something wrong either, but it's because you're different. Things are different. Your business needs to be different. And so I want to share a few lessons that I've learned throughout this past year. You know, some of them are big and heavy, and I think that as I was doing a lot of reflection and growth this past year, I was jotting down some notes, and I just wanted to share them with you. And hopefully, you guys can take some big takeaways from today's episode and these lessons that I'm sharing here today. And so, lesson one is you can't rebuild the old business with a new identity. That's it. Like, that was the first hard truth. And I was like, dang, that's right. That's so true. And that's the first thing I had to learn, that this business that I built all these years ago was built from a different version of me, a version who was still recovering from people pleasing, from perfectionism, from proving and performing. That version of me that was trying to be everything for everyone. And even though I knew, like, logically in my head, but my heart was still set on this place of service. And I'm not saying the two are different, but I had to reevaluate what that even meant to serve. Having the two levels of awareness where we cognitively and heart/soul realign. And so the business aspect of it, the business reflected that. And I had multiple offers. I was trying to please everybody because I wanted everybody to have this big, bold, beautiful life and experience all of what I had. And I gave from a place of love and intention and well being. But in reality, it was burning me out. It was a sacrificial service that I couldn't sustain. And so I had so many offers. I had content everywhere. I felt I had to be everywhere. And I was saying yes to every opportunity. And it worked until it didn't. And when my life came crashing down last year, I had to face that reality. And I was picking up these pieces of my life to rebuild. I realized I didn't even have the capacity to continue at that pace or sustain. And so that forced me to look at my business in a whole different way. Hence why today's episode. You get clear on what you actually want and what really matters. And you realize most of what you've been doing was actually just noise. It was for what you thought were the right reasons, but it wasn't moving you in the right direction to fulfill your God given gifts, talents, abilities, skills, your impact, your contributions, all the things that we're really here called and created for, and how we can realign and reinvent ourselves so that our business becomes a reflection of who we are. And so the question that I kept coming back to now became, what do I keep? What do I need to let go of? Right? Because I've already gotten crystal clear on who I am after this rebuild, after this reinvention, because that had to follow suit in my business to carry me forward. And so that's where I encourage you to also do the same if you're in the same boat. And I know it's hard because that felt like so much of my labor of love and tears and time and energy and blood and sweat and all this stuff that I poured into my content, into the creations, into the courses, into the programs, into, as you can imagine, all the things. It was a lot. But as a creator who just loves to create and serve, sometimes we have to pull it back and find the constraints. And so as you're building from this identity, you get crystal clear on what matters. And you realize you can't sustain this and it needs a reinvention as well. So I know that feeling of letting go might feel like failure. It may feel like you've wasted all this time, that you're starting over, that you are completely set back, that you always feel like you're at that starting line. But the truth is, you're not starting over. You're starting fresh from new perspective with years of experience. And that experience is wisdom. And so you're building from wisdom. You're building from past lessons of what did and didn't work. And so you get to choose what comes with you into this next version. And so lesson 2 is simplification. It isn't a strategy. Good God, it's a necessity. Because here's what this year taught me that I didn't expect. Is that when life strips you down to what's essential, like your bare bones basics, you realize how much of what you were and weren't carrying and what you did and didn't need. To clean out the closet, to simplify your life. Grief, they forced it, and loss demanded it. And to be honest, I didn't have that energy or capacity. Like I said, to sustain that was another form of burnout, taxing on what was already exhausted and the burnout on top of that. And so I didn't have that bandwidth for things that just drained me. I didn't have that capacity for anything that wasn't absolutely needed or necessary. And you know what happened? My life got a heck of a lot cleaner, clearer, and more aligned, more purposeful. My message got stronger, and I started to see what actually mattered. And it started to reignite this fire inside of me again. I started creating with intention. I started creating from this new version in this new place. And things just started to feel like sparks were igniting again. My confidence was reignited. The content that I was creating felt so much more energetically aligned. And I began to feel like this new version I was becoming was starting to set in place. It didn't feel like the pieces were still scattered. And maybe you're there, maybe you're not. But I want to encourage you that no matter where you are in your season, you just have to keep moving forward. You just have to keep going. If you've already walked through darkness, the light is on the other side, because we can't turn around and go backwards. We already know what that life was and what it taught us. And it's not for us in this season anymore. What once looked good on the outside, and now what I thought I should be doing from that place of recovering from people pleasing. But I had to ask myself, what was actually moving the needle? What was moving me? What was igniting and exciting me? Where were my passions and interests? Where was my heart and calling? Were they in alignment? And so I challenge you to ask yourself that as well. What if I applied these same simplification processes to my business? What if instead of the 10 offers, I had one? What if instead of posting on 5 different platforms multiple times a day, creating content, it felt like this endless, futile attempt at trying to be everywhere to everyone all the time? And that became so exhausting that I just had to pull back, and eventually my content just became scarce. So the question was, what if I just focused on one? How much more time and freedom would that allow for me? And even though I missed a lot of my favorite platforms, because they were all my favorite because I was on them all, but choosing one. And what if instead of saying yes to every opportunity, I said yes to only what felt aligned and what excited me? And so here's what I'm learning, is that simplification isn't about doing less. It's about doing what matters and doing it well. Because when you do it well, you become more confident and you want to create more of that, right? The whole less is more approach. And so lesson 3, reinventing your business requires letting go of who you were and who you were building for. And I know that that one is quite uncomfortable, but it's true. Because when you change, your audience changes too. And that's okay. Because here's the thing, you can't serve everyone. And trying to will kill you. Believe me. Oh my gosh. I wish I could preach this from the mountaintops, and one day I will. Oh my goodness, it will burn you out to where you have no spark or joy, and you have no will to keep doing what you were doing because you've exhausted yourself. And this is what the reality of burnout will do. I just want to say that because for years, I was trying to be all the things to everyone, from fitness to identity to confidence, business, life, faith, all the things. And like I said, it was exhausting because I wasn't clear on who I was actually serving. I felt so connected to all these versions of myself that throughout the years that I've healed, that I've overcome, that I've reinvented, that I've loved, that I've lost, that I've let go of, that I think indirectly I was serving those versions of me that needed a me for me back then. And maybe that's you too. I encourage you to explore this. There really is no right or wrong, but it's about truth, awareness, and honesty. And all of that, it forced me to get clear. And I'm not here to help everyone. I'm here to help faith-filled women who are building lives and businesses and simplifying the chaos so they can create something that is sustainable. That's what I'm here for. That's what I've always been here for. But somewhere in the mix, I got lost. And it means that some people, they won't resonate with that anymore. And I have to be cool with that. I have to be cool because, again, I can't serve a future from a past. And I'd rather serve a few people deeply than try to serve everyone superficially. So now, what I'm building, it means that I'm building my business from the ground up. And not because the old one was wrong or wasn't working, but it's because I'm different now. I'm building around one core message: business simplification through identity work. And I'm creating one core offer that solves one urgent problem. And it's how to build a simple, sustainable business and lifestyle when you're overwhelmed and burned out. And I'm done with the hustle. I'm done with the grind. I'm done with the burnout. Done with proving, performing, pleasing, and perfecting. And I'm doing this all from a place of trust, of clarity, from wisdom that I earned through this loss. And that's what reinvention looks like, at least to me. It's not about starting over, but building something new from everything you've learned. So here's what I want you to sit with this week. If you're in a season of reinvention, whether by choice or by force, ask yourself, 1, what am I carrying from the old version of my business that no longer fits who I'm becoming? 2, who am I actually called to serve? And am I trying to serve too many people? And 3, what would simplification look like if I applied it ruthlessly to my business and got crystal clear on who it is I serve and what I'm called to create in this season? And again, you don't have to answer all these questions perfectly, but I do challenge you to sit with these questions. And that's the moment that clarity will begin. So again, reinvention, it's not easy. Just like letting go is not easy. It's all painful. It's all uncomfortable. And that's the beautiful thing about growing pains, right? For us to grow, we have to outgrow. And it requires us to acknowledge what worked before isn't necessarily what's going to work in the future. And we need to make space for what's next. So here's what I do know, is that God doesn't waste your wilderness. He uses it to prepare you for what's coming. And if you're in your own season of reinvention right now, I want you to know you're being rebuilt and you're being redefined. So if this episode resonates, I encourage you to share it, send it to a woman who's rebuilding her life or her business, and tag me on Instagram or LinkedIn at I am Rachel Brooks. And if you want to walk through this whole reinvention process with me, if you want weekly strategies for building a simple, sustainable life and biz, subscribe to my newsletter. Every Thursday, I'm sharing what I'm learning as I build in real time. So thank you so much for being a part of this journey and for walking this with me. Until next week, take care and God bless.
Hey there. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Confident Woman Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Thanks again for listening.